I'm Pat Miller, and this is the Professional Photographer Podcast. By now, you know this show is about helping you build a strong photography business. That means being able to run a business that happens to take pictures as the product. You're probably doing almost everything, from time management, client relations, bookkeeping, packaging, marketing, sales, and more. With that kind of workload, not to mention your commitments to family and friends, your dedication to the craft can slip. You love to take pictures and you want to be as good as you can be, but in reality, you're tasked with so many things that getting better can sometimes get in the way. But what if you really want to improve? What if you really want to dedicate the time and effort to make the best images possible? It's not for the faint of heart. To begin with, you must admit that you're not as good as you'd like to be. You also need to put in the time to read and learn and take classes so you can acquire the skills and techniques to become, well, the best that you can be. Where do you start? How do you know where you are and where you can go? And is it really worth it? If you get really good and create outstanding images, is there a payoff personally and professionally? Our guest today is Ab Sesay, a teacher, passionate creator, and the creative director at the Mac Group. Ab Sesay is always thinking about getting better, and we're going to talk about what it takes to push yourself to excellence. It's time to level up. Are you in? We'll be back with Ab Sesay. Ab, welcome to the Professional Photographer Podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing very well, and thank you for having me on the Professional Photographers Podcast. It is a pleasure to be here today.
I'm glad to have you. We get to talk about doing excellent work. Professional photographers, they take pictures to make money. And if you take pictures and make money, you earn the right to take more pictures and make more money. But along the way, it's pretty easy to slide into taking pictures just to make money. And focusing on making the pictures as best they can be can kind of fall into the background. So I'm excited to have this conversation today because we get to explore how to take great pictures so you can make more money.
100%.
So where does it begin for a photographer that has the courage to not just do the work, but to do excellent work? Is it the vision and the passion that they feel like they have something to say?
I think it starts in two places. I think photography is one of those things that can literally take you anywhere in the world and give you the opportunity to meet anyone you want to meet. And I think photography also can just be something that you're absolutely in love with. You love visual expression, you love seeing, you love taking images, you love the process of after taking the images, processing them in such a way so that it kind of meets your vision, or you can kind of explore a new vision within the work. And so I feel like as I talk to more photographers, I feel like some people went to photography to escape something else. And then some people found photography and knew 100% that it was their calling. And I would say that I found that it was my calling. And it's something that I'm very, very passionate about and do literally all the time. I mean, even now when I walk to the gym on my iPhone, I make it like a short little 1 mile photo walk in which I will, shoot all the different, scraps of like Burger King wrappers or cups that I see, or just things where the morning light is hitting it in a certain way. Always just working to train my eye.
And as that process goes on, and now you're monetizing that passion and that gift, do you find that there is a stress between those two things, that the desire to make money and to put food on the table, but also to fulfill yourself creatively and this passion to capture what you see? Are those two things naturally at odds, or do you find them at odds in your own life?
I feel the work that you get hired to do can definitely be at odds with what you're passionate about. And I feel as if though every commercial photographer is going to run across that, especially if you find out that someone's not hiring you as much as for your vision, as it is to communicate their vision. And if you're a photographer who's curated a style, and let me not use the word style, let me say point of view in terms of the way that you take images, and you find clients that align with that and want you to execute your point of view, I feel as if though that alignment will bring you more continued success and less burnout. But I was listening to an audiobook recently by this author, Ali Abdel, who talks about productivity. And one of the types of burnout he talks about is misalignment burnout. And I feel as if though if you start out in photography simply to make money and find out what your clients want and just give your clients what they want, and it's kind of more of being a people pleaser than a photographer, sometimes you can start to find there is this burnout from misalignment, and taking on jobs that necessarily, when you hear the term when someone says, well, I did it, but I wouldn't necessarily put it in my portfolio. Mm-hmm. I think that you want to start to get to the point where all the images you take are something that you put in your portfolio, and that you don't burn out with something simply because you're not aligned with it. And I think if you take on too many projects where there's misalignment, then it does turn into work. And I think to protect yourself, you have to do personal projects. You have to somehow communicate your point of view in terms of what you want to do. And sometimes it could be a certain technique that you want to execute. In order to kind of keep what I'm going to call like creative alignment. It makes the role of being a photographer unbelievably gratifying.
I want to stay on this topic of burnout or feeling stuck, mm-hmm. or feeling like you're not fulfilled creatively when you are being hired by others to do work. Is that when that becomes most prominent? You feel stuck and burned out when you're doing what the client is asking you to do, but you're not running it through the filter and perspective of your photographic point of view. You're just doing what others tell you to do?
Well, I would say first off, we have to start by being extremely open-minded. And when someone brings you a project, understanding that they are hiring you because you are a professional. And not to have the knee-jerk reaction of, I need to follow their direction exactly. And I think that being a commercial photographer, you do have to do a little bit of exploration. And when somebody comes with an idea, finding out why they hired you, whether it's not, they loved some work that you've done. It's always a plus if someone says, oh, I saw this image that you took of such and such. I would love something like that. And on the flip side, sometimes when someone's hiring you out of convenience, they'll say, oh, my friend such and such recommended me to you, and I'm wondering if you could execute this job for us. There's a slight difference there. One person wants to work with you because you're a photographer and you're personable. Another person wants to work with you because they want you to execute the creative that you're known for. And so I don't know if I'm answering the question well, but I feel as if though when a client approaches you and you're thinking about how you execute the job or what they're asking for, approaching it with an open mind and trying to steer it in the direction of what your vision for their project is, if it can fall within your vision, is part of your job as a photographer and an artist. It is taking all their input, running it through your filter, and hopefully on the other side, you can give it a treatment that aligns with how you feel it should look creatively.
Which is that value add that you give as a professional. Do these three things. You use your vision and your creativity to do those three things in a way that you think is visually pleasing and you can deliver. That's the bonus of working with a professional that has a vision, as opposed to do these three things and you interpret that as that must mean this way of doing it. Am I hearing you right?
100%.
Okay. So let's go from being stuck in our creative vision and get into the feeling of, I know what I'm trying to shoot, but I really want to get better. And when you admit that you want to get better, that takes some courage. to admit that you can get better and that you're willing to do the work. And if someone came to you and said, Ab, please help me, I want to get better, where would you have them begin?
Man, in terms of getting better, I think first it takes a lot of self-awareness. And I think you have to ask yourself what do you feel, where do you feel like you're currently lacking? Do you feel as if though you're lacking simply in terms of vision? Do you think you're lacking in terms of the ability to like give direction? Do you think it's planning? Some people are brilliant, but by the time they get to approach a job, they didn't plan enough to kind of like clear a runway for them just to focus on the creative of that day, and they're dealing with actual production things. So I think self-awareness and having a team around you that can really, really, really make sure that you're telling yourself the truth and you know where you stand, and you can self-critique and have other people that can critique your work as well, so that ultimately you're not lying to yourself, and sometimes I think it's simply good. Let's say everything is perfect and you're exactly where you want to be. It's good to have people around you or just have a process in which you can question. I think, for me, like almost every time I shoot a picture and I'm in post and I get to the point of kind of like toning the image or just simply adding contrast, I start guessing myself even there. After I'm happy with everything else, it's like, okay, well, what should the final outcome be? So I think that ultimately I would tell someone that you really have to have a team of people around you in a process in which you're always looking to get better. And if you think that everything is perfect, be able to define why and have a really good understanding of, okay, this image, I nailed it. Let me pin this one to the wall because I feel as if though this is a milestone. And if there's other images, I think it's you just have to ask yourself, like, what, I could have posed this person better, or I should have taken 5 more minutes and lit this with a little bit more intention. Or when it comes to production, it's like, what, I really should have pushed that we got that elephant as a prop. I think these are all things that fall into what you do as an image maker to make sure that you can keep constantly improving, because if you're not improving, you're not questioning yourself, I can almost guarantee that you're stagnant and there's things happening around you that you're losing sight of. And, that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on like where you're at in your career. I know some artists don't want to look at any outside influences because they're really focusing on having somewhat of a pure vision. But then I think, when you're working commercially, it's very smart to be very, very aware of everything that's going on around you, because, those could be references that your clients call upon that, they want you to, be aware of as you're executing what you're doing for them.
When people say you need to be self-aware and you need to know where you're at, someone can perceive that as, well, these are all the things I don't know how to do yet, or this is where I'm inferior. But when you get opinions from others, it can also tell you, whoa, here's how far you get to go. Here's how much talent you do have. So getting people around you to give you that outside perspective, can that help you see the future almost? Like, you have a real gift for this, let's develop it. And is that fellow photographers? Are you hiring a mentor to coach you? How would we go about getting that kind of feedback if you're just a guy in his basement trying to make a photography studio happen?
So if you're someone who's literally in their basement just trying to make a photography studio happen, I would say social media is a great place to go. I have a lot of photographers who reach out to me on Instagram and just ask my opinion, but with images that they take. As you become more advanced, there are portfolio reviews that you can pay for, where you can sit down with a professional photo editor or a photographer or creative director and they will look at your work and give you their opinions and feedback in terms of like where your work fits in. And simply polling friends, if you have a lot of work for them to react to, just asking them, what they think about your work. I think all those things can be really, really helpful. But for the person starting out who's in their basement, I would say try to find a mentor. Go to workshops, go to places like imaging where you can meet other like-minded people. And I don't say that to promote imaging. I say it because I think it's actually extremely difficult to find community when you're first starting out. And finding that community is critical to your growth, having people to ask questions to, and, people who can evaluate your work and you can evaluate theirs and kind of exchange that critique. When I was in photo school, critique was one of those things that really allowed you to see someone else's point of view. And I think that's the most important thing is as a photographer, you want to have a point of view. And in terms of expanding and staying creative and staying open-minded, you want to understand the point of view of others.
We're going to talk about things we can consume and other ways we can get better in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go there, if someone's watching this, they're like, yes, I want to be good. Yes, I want to get better. Yes, I'm going to get people around me and take their feedback. Before we even step off, this isn't easy, right? To go from pretty good to great. This is it a grind? Is it tough to take those additional steps? Or if you're in the right frame of mind, it's easy to make those steps?
I think if you're in the right frame of mind, it's easy. When I started out in photography, the exciting part is it was so accessible in terms of art. And I thought that it was extremely easy. As I got more experience, I started realizing how difficult it can be at times, especially if you work outside your comfort zone. And I never tell myself that it's difficult. Every time I look to where I've made a mistake personally, or if I discuss with my team how we could have done better, it always boils down to pre-production. There's times like early in my career, I did a lot of street photography, and there are times where it's funny. One of my friends, we were shooting one day down in Soho and we saw Quentin Tarantino. And so we started following him, and then he went into this hair salon and we kind of waited. So when he came out, he had, we were going to cross paths, and I asked him if I could do a portrait. I did a portrait of him, and my friend was like, "Oh, can you get a picture of both of us?" And the picture I took of my friend with Quentin Tarantino was horribly out of focus. And he thought I did it on purpose, but it was just one of those things where it's just like, slow down, take a breath, make sure the picture's in focus, because it's not worth taking if it's not in focus, and I think I even tell myself that now if I'm working with a subject, like, am I just clicking the shutter to get to the next frame, or am I trying to make this frame as good as it can possibly be?
Let's talk resources. We want to start taking purposeful steps forward to become a better photographer. Mm-hmm. You mentioned coming to imaging to find community and get feedback, but are there books? Are there courses? Are there training programs? If we want to sign up for something or read something that helps us get better, where would you recommend we start?
In terms of what I can recommend, I think books are hugely important. For one reason, there's so many of them out there, and there's so much work that you can look at that can like influence and inspire you. B, if you're meeting with other people, it's a great way to get their critique on work that's not your own, so that you can better understand what they look at. And then when you do ask them for critique on your own work, you can know whether they're giving you the truth or not based upon, what they've seen before. And I think books are, so some books, like there's this book by Philip Montgomery called American Mirror. And I think this is a beautiful book because as photographers, oftentimes we get so worried about the technique that we forget truly to focus on what's happening in front of us. And on some shoots, let's say if I'm shooting a fashion shoot and I'm working with a model, I feel as if though I can take 300 pictures to walk away with 5. And then on some shoots, I feel like I can take 25 images to walk away with 5. And I feel like the 5 images would be stronger when I only take 25. And I think that as a photographer, learning to have a point of view of knowing what you really want to see in front of the camera, but also being aware of like how to direct so something can unfold. I feel like this book, American Mirror, is, it's documentary photography. So you're not really worried about the lighting. You're not really worried about all these things that the photographer didn't have control over, but you will still see the photographer's influence in the framing. In terms of the lighting, whether the available light is very important in the photo or whether or not it's more important to simply put a flash on camera so that you can accurately capture what's there because the events unfolding are so strong, And so I think this book is, for me, it's really important and it reminds me of that. Another book I look at is, I just picked this one up. This one's kind of hard to find, but it's by Nadav Khander. Sorry for blocking my microphone. And I just feel like there's just stylistic choices in here that I think are really smart as you look at the different portraits. And some of this stuff was based on assignments that he had. And I'm sure some of it is, personal work and portraits. But I feel like everything is more curated. Everything was done with greater intention. And I just feel as though it's a great portrait book to look at where you're able to see portraits that aren't necessarily standard, where there's, if I can show you like two images on this screen and, I'll give you time in case you have to block them out for something. But like for this image here, he's using motion blur and just has like the person's head moving, and I think it's really smart versus like the portrait on the next page in which he's kind of like, kind of playing with that whole Christ on a cross thing, but it's a musician with like a microphone.
Yeah.
And still wearing like a crown. So like maybe I look at that and I say, okay, that's like a little bit too contrived. But then just looking at the tone used in these portraits, one of them is very blue and cool toned. Another one is very natural. And then the use of like, just like in the front, there's like these little, I don't know, herbs or whatever going on. I just think that there's just smart and very calculated decisions in books like that I feel like seeing those little smart things where someone added it or made a decision to include it, I like to look at. And then finally, I think there's a book, and it's sad, this one became very hard to find, is the issues editor at New York Times Magazine, Kathy Ryan, came out with this book called Office Romance. And, she's a photo editor, very famous photo editor. And like, literally, she's just photographing things that she sees in the office. So as I flip through any random page, she's just finding these little moments taken over years in her office space where she works at, and you start to see like the relationship between like this image and then this image and how she's just looking at all these things that are going on and the use of like shadows and, again, situations where, as I walk to the gym, I think about this book as I walk past the same things every day. Whether I like it or not, they are changing, or like this image here, like on a snowy day, getting like these circles happening here and next to these scissors acting like they're about to cut something. Like, I feel like when I talk to portrait photographers, they're just looking at work of portrait photography. I feel like the good thing about books is they can show you work that necessarily doesn't relate to what you do, but just getting into the photographer's head and understanding like their thought process, and then also understanding like the edit, the order of the images, the size that they're representing them at. If they use any text next to the image can be very important. I think that understanding how text can benefit an image can be very, very helpful, because not every image stands on its own. And not every image needs to. I think sometimes as a commercial photographer, the relation of your image to a headline is very important. And so I think constantly looking for me is hugely helpful. And being aware of photography that looks like nothing about what you do. I mean, the Kathy Ryan book just reminds me of like the thousands of images I have in my iPhone of these little random moments that I thought were significant, but didn't know how they were significant. And now I look at her book and I'm just like, you know what? I should download 200 of these random images I have in my iPhone and edit them together. Like, is there something in my own head that I'm missing that I could translate into my commercial work and make me a better photographer? So I think that, and it allows me to have conversations with other people, and me asking for a critique on images I've took out of my iPhone that I've curated and sequenced versus me talking about, an assignment that I had is going to be very different. And it allows me to talk to different people, like it allows me to talk to someone who doesn't shoot portraits and still get their ideas on photography, which could catapult me into a whole other realm of photography I didn't even know that existed. That, there's some photographers who make thousands of dollars a year licensing their work to hotels. I could be sitting on images in my iPhone that a hotel wants to license to put on their wall, which may make me say, in the future, let me walk around and do the same work with a higher end camera so that, I can get pictures with a little bit more fidelity. In which point, again, it's always thinking, at some point where photographers now are letting when their pictures were shot on film, at some point there's going to become a point that says this image was not taken with AI. And I think we're basically already there.
In an average week, how much of our time, percentage-wise, would you dedicate to improving? Is this an everyday thing? Is this purposeful one session a week kind of thing? Is this when you have time? If you were coaching someone who really wanted to get better, how much of their time should be spent on it?
100% of the time. I think that now, I started going to the gym more, and it's to be in better shape when speaking in front of people, but also having to carry tons of equipment around. I recently did a shoot in the city, and when I scouted the location, I saw there was like a possibility that it's a weird part of the city. There's a part in Hudson Yards, not too far from Hudson Yards, where we were shooting this location called the Midnight Theater. And to get to it, you had to like walk off the street into this courtyard. And so I'm challenged with, okay, I'm going to have like probably 400 pounds worth of equipment. And worst case scenario, if I can't get security clearance to bring it underneath the building, which for some ungodful reason, there was a huge amount of security. In order, to just give some feedback, the building that we were shooting in, we had to drive under a building that was full of a bunch of lawyers. And so they felt as though there was a huge security risk. So in order to park and get to the loading dock, I had to get a certificate of insurance because we were going under the building. So we had to get our car sniffed out by a bomb sniffing dog and then escorted like to a specific loading dock. After that, I think they did even like light background checks and stuff, license, like it was unbelievable, and just a normal building in Manhattan. And so the benefit was going through about an hour of pre-production. I even went and met with the parking the kind of like the parking staff and loading dock staff a week earlier to make sure we had like everything ironed out in terms of like the proper insurance and all that type of stuff, you know. And the flip side of that is I would have had to walk about, I'm going to say about a half a block with about 400 pounds worth of gear. And so if I had to, being in good shape would be an amazing thing. And then having to take all that gear up 2 flights of stairs to get like to the theater that we were going to shoot in, you know? So I think, you know, mentally dealing with stress well, working out, you constantly want to be thinking about everything you can do to get better. Learning, you know, what's new in Photoshop, you know, AI retouching, new lighting techniques, like you know, anything that can make you 1% better every week. In everything I do, I'm thinking like, how can I get 1% better?
Let's talk about what's in it for us if we do get better. The power of being excellent and doing great work. If you've got a strong sense of style, you can shoot what you see, you can capture the image that you're looking for. There is gold at the end of the rainbow. This does result in more bookings and higher rates.
It can result in more bookings and higher rates, but I think ultimately it just results in being happier. And I think that as a photographer, if you only look at more bookings and higher rates as the measure of success, you could be very, very successful, but you could also be very, very unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as a photographer, to have a career that lasts a very long time, that you find very fulfilling, I think you really need to always focus on what makes you happy. The type of assignments, the type of projects, the type of people that you work with that can make you happy. So I think that the road to excellence and creating excellent images is that the days I'm coming home with images that I just think are beautiful, I'm not thinking about how much money I made. The days in which I feel as if though I was very creatively unfulfilled and the job was somewhat of a grind, then I'm very, very much thinking about, let me get this invoice out and when do I get paid? So
you talked about following others. You talked about finding 5 people whose art that you like and people that you want to do work in a similar style.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard you say that, you know, hold on, things change about every 4 years and that styles, maybe your favorite photographer, every 4 years, things are going to switch up. So what's next? What's the next big change that we need to be on the lookout for?
Oh, 100% is AI. 100% the next big change is already here, and it's more developed than we know it is. And it is definitely artificial intelligence. And it's also dealing with the fact that, you know, there's a different type of celebrity now that so much is so accessible to so many. And so, you know, I think the formula for success is changing. You know, previously in the early 90s, if you wanted to shoot, let's say, fashion or portraits or even become a director, you know, most directors started with music videos, and a lot of photographers started with the music magazines, whether it was Rolling Stone, XXL, Source Magazine, Vibe Magazine. A lot of photographers started there and then graduated to, like, you know, bigger publications such as, you know, Vogue, GQ. And I mean, you know, Anne Leibovitz started at Rolling Stone, you know, and then after that, she left Rolling Stone. You know, Mark Seliger came into Rolling Stone. He left Rolling Stone, and both of them went on to, I guess, what we can call bigger things, you know? I don't know if we can say better, because I mean, the stuff they did for Rolling Stone was amazing, you know? And I think what's next is AI, artificial intelligence. I think that one thing that interests me a lot about organizations like PPA is I think that there's something there that's evergreen, in that people are going to get burnt out by looking at computer screens. And I think the need to experience things in person is going to become even greater. And I think that as a creator, giving people the feeling as if though they were there is going to become even more important. And, what you and I are doing right now, having a conversation for a podcast, these things are going to become even more and more important. I think that the same way digital took off, but now there's people who are truly passionate about film. I think we're going to find the same thing where AI is going to control a huge amount, on the commercial side. But I feel as if though, you're going to go to workshops, and in that workshop, they're going to say, no one can use AI during this workshop. Like this is going to be a completely analog experience. And I think people are really, I think right now people go camping. I think that, there'll just be a different type of camping, that will get rid of that influence. And so I think that, to be on the cutting edge now, I think you actually need to get out and meet people and form community. I think that's the most important thing. I think that if you don't get out of your basement, I think you're going to get left behind. So I think things are going to be based on real relationships, and there's going to be a huge amount of value in that.
Okay. Look at that. What's the next big thing? It's already here. It's AI. Okay. And I'm going to get left behind if I don't go out and talk to people. That's not where I thought you were going to go. Building those real relationships, because you're already seeing now and 12 months in the future where people are totally consumed with the artificial, that being a leader in the community space and building real relationships with people, that's going to be the competitive advantage?
100%. So let me give you an example. How many people have a writer in their life that they love working with? Not many. I think hiring, I think writing, a really good writer is one, it's a unique skill. And two, I think a lot of people don't realize the value in having someone who is actually a professional writer, do your writing for you. And so a lot of people are now using AI to do their writing, and they're building a relationship with a writer through a machine. And as they build that muscle, they aren't going to want to veer from that. And so it is going to take up some market share. As a photographer, I have clients that love working with me, that love when I'm on a shoot, that love the fact that I can listen and interpret what they want. And we just have a relationship. They like paying me. I like working with them. I'm excited when they call. And I think that you have to stay in motion or you'll get replaced. My digital writer, if there's something that comes out that's better than Chat GPT, it's like, oh, this is better than Chat GPT. I'm now moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the world of retouching. When I started out, a retoucher was probably on the low end, was probably billing around $250 an hour, and a single image taking multiple hours. On the high end, I remember there was this Pascal Dangan, if I'm getting his name right, for Box Studios. He had like 3 floors, I think in the Meatpacking District or Chelsea somewhere. And I saw an invoice from a retouching job that he did. I can't say who the client was for. It was for 4 images, and it was $19,000. Now, you have fast forward, you have a lot of people overseas who started doing retouching for $15, $25 an image. Now, fast forward, you have software like Evoto that's retouching images very similar to the way you'd find someone retouch them overseas for a fraction of a penny. And so I just think ultimately, that's one of the things hugely affected by AI. That's why I said you have to be aware of it, so that if you're trying to charge certain clients X amount of dollars, for a certain task, that they don't think that you're trying to rip them off because there's a much easier way you could have done it, Um, and so, yeah, I just think that I think that building relationships has universally always worked out in an unbelievable way for photographers. Period. Point blank. Like that is your number one resource as a photographer, is what you have access to and who you have access to.
Building those relationships help us get better. Getting better helps us create better work for clients. And this dedication to hone our creative vision also future-proofs us. That's a really important insight that you're making, that when we are more of who we are and more of what we see, we become more unique in a world where the floor of commonality, the average of graphics and visuals that we see will become easier to produce than ever, but you're still Ab. Only you can shoot what you see. And having what you see be able to come out of the camera is future-proofing. It's a really important insight. And it puts stakes in the ground as far as why it's important to get better.
100%.
Why you need to get better at what you do.
And can I just say, in terms of getting better, you're really, really good at this. Because as I think back to what I'm saying and I hear your summaries, I'm like, you know what? Like you are unbelievably good at this. I'm listening back and I'm just like, man, I should have said what he said, that was a great answer.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want this show to help people build a more fulfilling business. And I love the input that you've given us about the fulfillment comes from your passion and getting better at capturing the images you're trying to capture. Because I'm not a photographer, I'm a capitalist. I'm always wanting people to make more money and build a business.
100%.
So where these two things are meeting is really fascinating to me. I want to close with this. What's at stake for us if we don't push ourselves and we don't really go all out every day, 100% of the time, to become the best photographer that we can be? What's at stake?
Not having a career as a photographer, or finding that you're in a career as a photographer where you're burning out. I think those are the things that, I did a maternity shoot one time, and the client loved the images, and they came back and they had a lot of clientele for me. They're like, Ab, you should run a business as a maternity shoot. You and I could partner with each other, and we could, I can find moms for you. I'm very connected. And this person was very connected. And I just told myself, I was like, you know what? Financially, this will be very fulfilling. It's relatively easy work. It wouldn't stress me out. But creatively, I wouldn't find it fulfilling at all. It's almost like there wouldn't be enough problems for me to solve in it. I would fear it would become repetitive. And I didn't take the offer. People still come to me from time to time asking, but it's not something that I'm advertising or seeking out. So I drifted off on that one a little bit.
What do you mean?
No, I feel like as I was answering you, I was trying to think of back. I was like, what was actually the question?
Well, I'll give you the question again, then if you want to take another shot at it. But the question was, what's at stake if we don't push ourselves to strive to become the best photographer we can be?
If you don't push yourself to become the best photographer you can be, it's going to be regret. And for me, the worst thing that I could ever come off a photo shoot with is regret. And no matter how much I get paid, no matter what the circumstances are, when I go back home and I look at the images, I personally need that feeling of like, you know what? I knocked this one out of the park. And I wouldn't have done anything differently. Like everything lined up. And I gave this 100%. Like I simply gave this the best that I possibly could give it. And I think if you're okay with that, then I'm definitely not the right teacher for you, you know? But I think ultimately that's the thing, man. I want to live a life in which I truly understand regret, but I want to have as little regret as possible.
The way you talk about regret sounds like you see your talent as a gift, not as a commodity. I know that sounds simple to talk to a photographer that they see their talent as a gift, but it feels like almost like you feel an expiration date on your creativity, or that you feel like this is truly a blessing that you have that you need to take care of and hone. Is that the way you think about it?
You know, I never. I think of it as just being lucky, for lack of a better term. I mean, I do like to think of it as a gift, but I feel like I've stumbled too much and I've worked too hard for this to be a gift. If all gifts were like this, I don't want any more.
No more gifts. Quit gifting me.
But I feel like I'm really lucky that some weeks I look back and I'm just like, man, I made a living doing that. Like, is that real? Or, you know, people ask me questions, or, you know, the fact I'm coming to teach at PPA, it's just like, really? Someone would pay me to do that? You know, I think every time you have those thoughts, I don't know. I feel like if you win the lottery, it's not a gift. You feel really lucky. I feel like, you know, I rolled the dice. I won the lottery choosing photography. And I just feel extremely, extremely lucky.
Ab Sesay, thanks for joining us on the Professional Photographer Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Pat, thank you. This was really a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Professional Photographers Podcast. I'm Pat Miller, your host. What do you think? Ab was pretty good, wasn't he? Did he inspire you to push yourself to get to the next level? Did it blow your mind when I asked him, what percentage of the time are you thinking about getting better? And he said, 100%. Hopefully our conversation today has pushed you to raise your game. And if you enjoyed the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. There are 2 specific ways that you can help this show. First, subscribe to it. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscription button. If you're listening on Spotify or in other places, subscribe to the show. That will help us reach more people. The other thing you can do, and this is really important, leave a comment and tell us exactly what spoke to you. What are you taking away? What did you love that Ab had to say? We want to know, because when we hear what's connecting with you, we can create better shows. It's really a privilege to do this show for you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm Pat Miller, your host. We'll see you next time.